So there are 7 learning styles. Our brains are all wired very differently. We all consume content in different ways. We all learn in different ways. And there are 7 learning styles. And I'm going to explain just now very briefly through content how you can reach people by repurposing and bearing in mind the learning style. So firstly, we have our visual learners. So visual learners, I think we can probably all think of times where someone's been explaining something to us and you haven't really understood it. And then they said, oh, let me just draw it. Let me just get a diagram and explain it by visual content. And then all of a sudden it makes sense. So the people who are more visual like to learn in that way. So the kind of content that you can create for visual learners is, images, photos, slideshows, animations. Visual learners probably search via Pinterest a lot. They're probably on things like Instagram. So when you're repurposing content, if you create content that's not connecting with visual learners, then think about that. I want you to meet Barry. So he's one of the 68% of people who don't listen to podcasts, but he is your ideal client. Okay, he's the ideal person to consume your content and then go on and purchase whatever it is that you sell in the homebrew industry. Okay, but he doesn't listen to podcasts. He doesn't have a clue. So when you're putting your podcast out there on iTunes and Spotify, Barry's not going to find you. Okay, but Barry has this problem with brewing this batch of IPA, and you've just put this podcast episode out that if he found it, you'd solve all of his problems. He'd fall in love with you. He'd start to consume all of your content, be a fan for life. And then, as I said, go on and help grow your business through purchasing from you as well. But what does Barry do instead? First thing in the morning when Barry gets up, he's on Instagram. Before he's even got out of bed, reaches for his phone, he's on Instagram. Does anyone else do this? Does anyone else drop the phone on their face when they've been in bed? Because I have, really hurts your nose. So he's on Instagram, okay, because he's thinking, how am I going to solve this problem? He doesn't find you because you're a podcast. He hasn't gone to iTunes or Spotify. He's gone to Instagram. But what could you do to reach Barry through your podcast? So you could go onto IGTV. You could go onto Instagram stories. You could take little sound bites from your podcast and you could just put them onto Instagram. There's lots of audiograms of those little sound bites that you see that have an image and an animation, take really good parts of podcasts or audio. Insta stories is great. Is anyone a fan of Insta stories in here? I love them. So, you can go on there, but people on Instagram spend 80% of their time in stories and only 20% in the feed. So it's really important to create content in stories. But if you've done that, if you've done your podcast and then repurposed it, Barry would have found you. You'd have helped solve this problem and then he would have fallen in love with you, but you didn't do that. So this is really powerful because what we've done here is we've done one Facebook Live and then we've repurposed it into all of these different forms of content that will connect with different people, connect with all of those learners, the verbal learners, social, interpersonal, oral, solitary, verbal, physical and logical, all through that one Facebook Live and repurposing. And we've gone from Facebook, where not everyone is and not everyone consumes live content, to your website, to YouTube, to Instagram, to LinkedIn, to Medium, to guest contributing sites that you work with. So loads and loads and loads of places from one Facebook Live. And that's the power of content repurposing. And this is what you should be doing, not on a hamster wheel of constantly thinking about the next content, but actually what have I created and how can I start to create more content from that?